Hello, I'm Anita White. I'm a life coach with WhiteLighter Coaching Quest. Welcome to my show, Coaching Conversations. On my show, we have a conversation, a heart-to-heart conversation with someone in the community about how they live their divine purpose by setting their day with intention. Today, my guest is Curtis Christian. Welcome, Curtis.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, well, today we're just going to get started a little bit with, tell me a little bit about you and your life.
Okay. By day, I have a day job that I guess that I've always done and switched. Right now, I just talk to doctors about alternative things that they can consider for their practice. Complements my education somewhat nicely in holistic health. And then by night, I'm setting up my own coaching practice, which is very much reflects the intention of this show, which is helping other people not only discover and unlock their own purpose, but then start bringing that into the world. So I live here in Stillwater with my son, and we're just getting rolling with that with a lot of very exciting things as far as different programs and products and things that I'll be offering to help unlock and bring that purpose out in others.
Now, I have had a lot of clients that seem to want to work in the emotional, kind of their emotional work more than they do in their spiritual work. And I think when we live from our divine purpose, that it takes a lot of time in kind of solace or in quiet. And I encourage people to do a lot of meditation, and a lot of folks are like, I don't even know where to start. Does that mean deep breathing? And they go right to transcendental meditation, where they have to really do some kind of focused, intentional work. And in thinking about what you're doing with writing a book and putting together some information on how people can help themselves through writing, that piece came into mind for me. That's how I really kind of listen to that inner self, and to really sit down and focus that energy on what is it in me that I think will help someone else? What is it that I know, what words can I put together that I think will help someone else? So to have, and I've had people say that you just say some amazing things, but I don't remember what it was. And when I hear that, I used to go, oh, wait a minute, right? We're really listening then if you don't remember what it was. And what I realized is that it was going to their soul. It was going to their heart. It was going to something that had meaning, and that somewhere it would resonate and it would come out in a different way. They wouldn't recognize that it came from me, but it got in. So do you want to talk a little bit about what brought you to that point where you decided this is the type of coaching that you wanted to do?
Yeah, it really started with a woman that I was dating. I got into NLP based on just online searches and whatnot, and it started off with a lot of techniques and tools people used to meet women at the bar. So I started off just learning some things about NLP, and it was interesting, but for that particular purpose, it didn't really resonate with me. So I wanted to learn more about it. And then there's this woman that I was dating at the time that she told me that she had an expiration date. She originally said she didn't want to get into a relationship because she had cancer. And then she said, when things started, we started hitting it off, she thought, well, maybe she'll allow herself to, enjoy life, for the remaining time that she had. Then she approached me and told me that expiration date was a lot sooner than she had thought. So she didn't think she would have to, give me this news, for a while down the road. But it turns out that that time is coming. And at that point, something shifted in me. Like, I didn't necessarily want to accept that. Her plan was to she had children, so she was allowing her children to go with their respective fathers, and she was going to wander off in the woods and spend her, transition her last moments into that in nature. And I felt, I told her, if that's really what you want to do, that's fine. I struggled with it personally, but if that was, her choice, I would prefer, however, to have her, just move in with me and at least be with someone that, loved her, someone she loved within those, last, days, whatever it is that she ended up having. And during that time, there was something in me that I connected with. I didn't know what it was. Before that, the idea of God or the divine or whatever you happen to call it was more of just a concept for me. And that was the first time that I really, because I had to face death in a way, not my own, but that of another. And I felt a lot of pressure about somebody else's life being in my hands in a way. That's what I thought. It really wasn't. It had nothing to do with me. But each day we got up, the prayers I would say, the things I was connecting to something. There's something else guiding it. Like I would find myself, wondering, worrying about what's the best thing to make her, because food can be very, important in this type of thing. Make her some tea and this and that. And while my mind was worrying about all this, there was just this underlining peace behind it that was driving it all. Mm-hmm. And so we got to the point of where her expiration date was supposed to be, and she transitioned through that, and we made it well beyond that, and now she's happily married, and the cancer is no longer there.
Oh my goodness!
But by following this deep voice inside, we together, I guess, just inspired her life to go beyond what it had been defined by medical science, mm-hmm. And looking back. After that, then I wanted to go back and find out what that voice was, what it was that we were following during that time that kind of was running the show while the mind did its thing. Mm-hmm. And in doing so, I went back to the NLP because I still had a very large interest in the mind, the how it worked and how those two things connected, how the divine can use the mind as a tool to come, bring itself out into the world through language. And that's when I found the Meta Institute and went through the 15-month program where we met and learned those tools as far as how to utilize that to connect to that voice in others and help bring that out.
So a lot of people don't understand what neuro-linguistic programming is. And I remember my first experience with that was with a life coach from the West Coast that was very dynamic and was doing all kinds of worldwide seminars. And he'd pull people out of the audience, and he was kind of a real in-your-face kind of guy. And I remember wanting to have the power to shift my mood because that was so important to me. I was having a really difficult time, and I realized that there was many different situations in my life where I wasn't allowed to grieve and where I wasn't allowed to feel. So when I would get into that situation where I was, stressed about something or confronted with something, I would shut down. And so when I saw this guy getting people ramped up in a certain emotion, I started practicing that instead of getting into the negative thing. It was like, I'm gonna feel joy, I'm gonna feel joy, I'm gonna feel joy, and pretty soon you start feeling joy. And to be able to shift a thought instead of thinking about how that guy's just not into me, that, oh, he's really crazy about me. And to keep that going, so then when I see them, I don't expect that they're going to treat me badly. So that the things that inspired me to go and seek out NLP was that I had researched what a life coach was, and I knew how to be a good friend, and I knew how to sponsor people in 12-step programs, so I knew how to get people to do work on themselves and tell them what they needed to do to work on themselves and how to make themselves feel better, like writing a gratitude list or a list of accomplishments, or to find a way that they can give themselves accolades so they have self-esteem. I didn't have a direction. And when I found Meta Institute, it was about being able to practice neuro-linguistic programming in every area of my life. I was teasing earlier about the guys in the studio here, and I am very hypersensitive to words and what they mean and what they don't mean. And so when I hear the word cut, or when I hear the word I've got to pop that up, or something, we're going to go shoot another show. And I'm really careful about when I put that on Facebook or something, because it's like that's a language then associated with me. And even though the word is separate than what it really means to me, it means something else because it's lingo for the studio. I've got more of a sensitivity than on how I relay that to other people. And with NLP, there came to me, this is after I graduated and after I got into practice a lot, was that how we, in our senses, that's how we receive information. So when we say getting a reception on a television set, you've got the color, you've got the sound, you've got whether it's fuzzy or clear, all of that kind of stuff. And we learn how to use some of that information in NLP work with other people. But as we're growing as human beings, we receive information from visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, and gustatory. That's how we receive information. And that's how our senses hold information and store information. So then when we are, as practitioners, working with people and we're able to hear in someone's language how they kind of receive that information and we're able to match that so they open more of that up, for me it's then finding their favorite way to deliver their healing or their transformations. or for them to release that, they tell it. I mean, I know that with all my clients, they tell me what they need, and they don't hear themselves. And that's that piece again about some way of having some kind of meditation, some practice, and that's what you talked about, is that you went to a very deep part of yourself. And it was, and I call that your soul self or your spirit self. And that spirit just says, listen, this is it. This is what you got to do. And it might not even be in the language you understand, but you respond because it drives you. And for me, that's what a divine purpose or a divine calling is. It's a voice inside of me that I just cannot stop. That it's like, that is going to keep me going to the next thing. And no matter how many times I want to put down what I think that idea of what my next thing is to do. Because I've reinvented myself a lot of times. I have a lot of different titles, and every one of those things I've needed to do in order to do what I'm doing now, in order to understand people from all walks of life and not have to judge them on, what they're doing or they're not doing. And one of the things that I remember was one of our first classes at Meta Institute, and we were supposed to describe what was it that we really wanted to accomplish by being in that class. And I was in the back of the class, and you were in the front of the class, and you said, I really just want to learn how to love people unconditionally. And I was back there weeping, because I just thought, this young guy, there's so much more people chasing the dollar or, trying to, use NLP to date girls or whatever, because I would have never guessed that from you. Never guessed that, because your heart was like right on the table. And I went, oh, Jesus just walked in the room. And I was like, who is this guy? So, but anyway, tell me a little bit about maybe your family life and how NLP has played into what's going on there.
Well, my son recently moved in with me full time. Mm-hmm. He has stayed with me on and off, and I've lived back with my parents where he has been at. But so that's something that we are working out together too. It was originally when he was born, just a time in my life when I wasn't fully ready to know how to take on that responsibility. But he's been a big driving force in why I chose to go down the path I did with NLP and my own personal growth and development in my relationship with spirit. Just keeping in mind that I want to be the best. Originally, it was the best for person for him, because there was that role. It turned into I wanted to be the best person for me. As I gained that relationship with myself, it turned into I want to be the best person for me. The natural byproduct is the best for him as well.
Right.
But we have the typical things anybody says with children as far as how that comes up, but we do create that space and notice those words, both when I notice things that I am doing and saying, just not to push anything away or necessarily to change anything, say anything's good or bad, but when I approach things a certain way, and then to kind of sit down with him and check in again, because I too, when I was young, we're shown how not to feel, essentially. We're shown how to push those emotions away, as you stated. And when I notice that either I'm still doing that or he's doing that, I like to have to sit down and have that conversation. And he's quite an amazing young man to where he can have some very adult conversations, and we can start to tease out and just create some space and some awareness between our feelings, between the thoughts that we experience, and both grow together as a family that way. And I do see that very similar tools throughout the rest of our family. It's once things happen in one person, those that are around them, it creates the opportunity for that to be experienced for those that are close to them, very close friends, families. And my sister married someone who also went to the Meta Institute, so he's kind of, he's been a little further along, so he's kind of been my coach in a way, him and her both, in both, things emotional, spiritual, and how to transition them out into the physical world. Anytime I had a job interview or this or that, they would sit down and coach me through that process too, and that really helped me learn how to bring myself out and allowed me to experience the tools inside myself to now be able to share that with others. So it's really every shift she's made and he's made, has been reflected in the relationship with our family. We've always been a very close family, but it's mostly been based on the concept, the idea of what family was supposed to be. Family's supposed to look like when somebody calls you late at night, you sit there and talk to them, or you go, pick them up from the bar so they don't have to, drink and drive, that type of thing. But it's really that the outside still looks the same, but it's more genuine. It's not I have to because I, share the same blood and the same DNA as this person.
Yeah.
It's I have the opportunity to express love, and it's just a natural. The underneath it is now different. It's not based on a concept. It's based on we together as a family are now coming together, and we're talking about some of the hurts that happened when we were younger.
Wow.
Those things that you don't talk about.
Yeah.
We're actually sitting down, but this isn't personal to anybody, but this all happened, and this is why we have related to each other the way we have, and we have a very beautiful family even with that. But if we can look at this and allow some of that to be released, like that beauty gets to sink deeper and it gets to expand, and it's really helping in a relationship with my siblings, my parents, and my son, and it's really all those tools have really just experienced in a whole different way now that I get to be with him all permanently.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. Wow, that's an amazing way of looking at it. It's like getting the elephant out of the middle of the room.
Right.
And it takes a lot of courage to do that, because to say how you feel when you've been taught not to put it down, whatever, just ignore that it happened, and everybody's ignored what has happened. And then when you bring it up, and it's like no one really wants to talk about it because they know it's going to be uncomfortable. Somebody's going to get hurt. Somebody's going to get mad. Somebody's going to have a feeling, and no one knows how to deal with it. So accolades for your family to make that change. One of the other people I collaborate with, she talks about legacy, and the legacy that we bring in to this life from the download in our ancestry, and the patterns that we already are here with because of that DNA. And I discovered there's one of the things in my family that I changed in legacy that way, and it was just in the language. My mother would say, "Shame on you." And it would just deflate me. It would take all the self-esteem, and I knew she was just trying to correct me. I knew she had good intentions. She just wanted to make me stop whatever behavior was or whatever I did. It was a judgment on her part to try and get me to change. But that shame on you would just take me out inside. I would just feel like crap, And I started like loathing myself because I was full of that shame. And shame is like what I feel about myself. Guilt is what I feel about what I've done. So then I would have that kind of combination going on, not even know how to dissect what the difference is between shame and guilt. But I'm pretty sure that someone in her family said, "Shame on you." Could have been her grandpa, could have been her dad, could have been a sibling, could have been an uncle or an aunt. And I'll bet the generation before them passed that on too. That it was, just like the Depression, people having, not wanting to let go of the money that they had, and the whole bartering system and how to do that right, and, not wanting to spend money and saying we don't have enough all the time, so living in that poverty consciousness, that was brought down through that legacy of language. So that's been something that I've been kind of ruminating on about. It's like, okay, so what other things that are really downloaded in my DNA, that's part of my operating system? Because I got 50 trillion cells reading that DNA saying, okay, how are we going to act from here? And then calibrating what's going to come out. And what influence do I have with my language to recode that? And what, technique or what energy I can give to changing that. And I've been really focusing my practice on how I'm coaching people more four-dimensionally, because I'm very much an academic with how I deliver information. I want to make sure that people understand it the right way. So I get into that mental confines in their brain and try and get into what they understand and how they understand it. And then emotionally, so if I can bring someone's feelings up and I can see how it's connecting, just like when I said how I influenced you, influenced me in the class, it's like, okay, there's then some rapport emotionally. But then physically too, that a lot of people have physical ailments and problems that if the emotional stuff is released or healed, the physical thing automatically goes with. I had a client that came in and she had a problem with her shoulder. And she kept going, my shoulder hurts, my shoulder hurts. And by the end of the session, she walked out, I said, how's your shoulder? And she'd been carrying everything there. But, I would have went and got some Vicodin, right? That's the situation. You could have a physical problem, you go get physical care. And the spiritual element that seems to me it would more surround those other dimensions, that seems to be a lot on what's on the back burner with people. And if I think, and that's my belief, is that's the core of the electricity that runs in my body, that is what the spirit is, what lights my heart and sends those, 40,000 neurons in your heart to keep going, that if that's my spirit self, then if I'm not in tune with that heart energy and that light and love inside of me, then what comes out is really kind of sporadic and it's not focused. But when I focus there, then whatever gift or talent that I want to bring out and serving my divine, like doing this show, I would have never thought this. I was really scared to do TV. I had all kinds of, trepidation, and I did a different show in the studio, and I had a lot of, just fear about it. But then once I got to, well, let's just do the mechanical part and see what happens. And of course I had fancy ideas that maybe I'd be picked up by a big, station and all that kind of stuff. But I guess for me what has happened is that if I'm afraid of it and I do it anyway, I find that there's a really bigger way that I can serve other people. Because there will be probably maybe 100, 200, 300 people that might watch this, or maybe 100 people that'll watch us in the middle of the night because there's a spot open. But that's 100 more people than I'll be able to see in my office. That's something I would say or something you would say would make a difference to them, and they'd say, okay, what does my heart and soul want from my life? So is there anything you'd like to add about that? Or?
Yeah, it's, I think a lot of what any discussion we've had, we've always resonated very closely, the things you have to say. And then the fear thing is a big piece, because we do, that's a lot generational too. If we find that we're avoiding a particular emotion, it is likely that our parents, avoided that emotion too. We have that tendency. That's also, most likely why physical ailments are, you have a higher likelihood if your parents have experienced that physical ailment. So, they do, heredity-wise, we do pass along physical ailments, and we also pass along our tendency to experience or avoid emotion. And when you, I guess, take things back generationally, and it's not too many generations ago that most of us were trained to, be afraid of really expressing ourselves. If we questioned the hierarchy, the monarchy, the whatever it happened to be, whether it was in the Egyptian times, the times of the kings and queens, the times of the Caesars, or whoever it happened to be, most of our ancestors were the ones who did not question things. Those who questioned things were, unfortunately during that time, burned at a stake, or, kind of done with this, like you don't question the king, you don't question. Those of us who survived genetically have been, done so by suppressing anything we think, anything we feel. So it is most likely if your mother said, shame on you, something like that, it was because her mother said that to her, because her mother had to. That's what she was given. Her mother had to. There comes a time, though, when it's like, okay, that is our family legacy. We'll just acknowledge that, but now things are changing. Now it's okay to be ourselves. We have created a world and an environment to where we can come out now, and it is okay. And facing fear, which fear has been ingrained a lot of that too, facing that fear is also okay. And there's nothing wrong with having fear. In fact, there's this tendency that people who are fearless are ones to admire. And it's not the fearlessness that's actually that to admire. It's those that have that fear, but realize that they're not that fear. That something, whatever they are, is bigger than that fear, or they wouldn't notice the fear itself. So to be able to notice that fear and go on like you are right now, and this very well could get picked up by a huge station, but it starts somewhere, it starts slow, and you build that seed and you nurture that seed correctly. You nurture that seed, because when you want to, you said like that pain here, that's like the fruit of whatever was planted, and whatever is planted is a seed, and that seed gets back to the root cause that some people talk about as well. But that seed is nurtured a particular way, and if whatever that seed is planted was nurtured correctly, there can be a lot of value in some of the things we avoid, in anger, in fear. Someone who's angry, they are very assertive. They stick up and they speak for themselves. Someone who's fearful, they're kind of proceed with caution in a way, but those that still proceed, do still move forward. So if you combine these with things like peace and understanding and compassion, and utilize the tools in every single emotion, then that fruit may not manifest as a pain. And we have a tendency in this world to, see if you think of it as fruit growing on a bush or something, see the ones that we don't like and pick them and throw them away. But if you just actually say, oh, you weren't nurtured properly, so let's, from here on out, let that fall away, nurture it correctly.
Yeah.
They're the ailments that we pass along generationally, the conditioning that we pass along generationally. It's a matter of saying, okay, that is how I was raised. That is how you were raised, but that doesn't mean that's how we have to continue to pass along to those that we love.
Exactly. So shame on you was totally not okay in my family. I told my sons if they said it, it was like saying the F word. So they treated it like profanity. So their perception of that is different than the legacy I grew up where it was normal every day talking. So we have the gift of language where we can shift and change everything about how things are, even though inside of me sometimes I would want to say it, right? Because it's there,
what I
but
do
I
with my
wouldn't.
son when I hear him or see him say something, and it's not something like, oh, don't do that, you're a bad boy. It's just no. It's like Damien, let's just create a stop here and see what you did, and create a split. Like I love you, but is this the most optimal way to do this? Can you think of a different way? So next time whatever you notice coming up, let's just stop and be aware of that and determine if that's really what it is you want to do or say. And it's worked in some cases. In some cases, he's. Most of us, when we do connect to that divine purpose, that thing inside of us that does drive the show, we do come from a place of love. We don't want to pass on hurts. So when we become aware of that and give ourselves choice, more often than not, if you really are coming from a place, you're going to choose the most optimal thing. The most optimal thing for you in that moment might not be the most optimal thing if you were Jesus. If Jesus, but it is more optimal than what you were about to do. And we can slowly, take those choices and build up to someone that does reflect those saints and sages that we all admire.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like a really good place for us to stop. Thank you so much for being on my show today.
You're
I
very
really
welcome.
appreciate you coming.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And again, I'm Anita White. Thank you for joining me on my show, Coaching Conversations. And just remember, no matter who you think you are always so much more than that.